interesting topics under discussion. I wanted to make some comment. The first is I look forward to the discussion about the Webster Street lot. For all the 35 years I've lived in town, there's always been a discussion about how much potential this lot has. And so I look forward, I hope that we're going to be building over a surface lot, and we'll have to see. But the main reason I wanted to speak briefly tonight was about the items that are under discussion under planning and zoning. Not necessarily in the order, I don't have the agenda right in front of me, but the waterfront industrial zone study, the 187-page final draft. I have been following and participating in the roughly, I guess, 9 months to a year of public meetings. I think I really like a lot of the work that UTL did. However, in one of their final discussions in front of the waterfront industrial zone study committee, I was quite saddened when some members of planning and zoning mentioned that they felt it would look messy and not necessarily, and I'm not quoting them, but it's all in the recording. They didn't want to note the currently known sites that have contamination from our industrial past. And so I had barely enough time to take a look at the study. I was zipping through it, and on page 24, there is one sentence at the end of the first paragraph that states a very little, the paragraph entitled Contamination, Water Quality, and Flood Resiliency. There is one sentence at the end that barely talks about the issue of contaminated soils. And I won't be going into it in detail because I did give this to you, Teal, but we have some sites that have major toxic materials that are known by the state of Connecticut, by the federal government, and by our city that will inhibit future potential growth and redevelopment due to our former industrial past. There are ways forward with it. There could even be additional federal funds, but to leave that out of this important study or report because we're trying to make it look nicer, which was a comment from Tammy from Planning and Zoning, thought it wouldn't look good to have any reference. I'm not suggesting we want to scare people off, but I know that we should and could let all of our residents know, our businesses know, our future businesses, and all of you in the council who are laymen, that these sites are things that should be, they're in the public record. If you look, and UTL either didn't look and do their due diligence, or there is a need to include a map, and again, I didn't look through all 187. I'm hoping that they added the map back in, but it wasn't in one of the last public meetings. So I ask that you consider and reconsider this, because we do have an industrial past. We can't escape it and cover it up. I think we need to include that with better words, with more words. Lastly, with the ADUs, I am quite sad. I do agree with this committee that there be some form of neighbor notification. I think that was a terrific idea from this committee. I do think it should be less onerous and should be what we require of certain toxic waste cleanups, which is posting a certain size sign in front of that home that lets people know that there's going to be an ADU proposed. The one thing that last thing I'm going to say, the planning and zoning, if you'll indulge me, and I thank you, is that they were asked, I sent information, they were myopic as far as what they will allow an ADU to be. They are not being modern thinkers on the planning and zoning and this committee that studied ADUs, because most tiny homes are built off-site in order to reduce the cost. So how do they get those tiny homes to the site? They put them on wheels. And there is an exclusion for anything with wheels in this ADU proposal. And I think that is a mistake. It is myopic, and it will reduce the amount of people that will have access to tiny homes and embrace what we want to do with ADUs. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Ms. Lauricella. Sabrina, is there anybody else signed up to speak?
Anybody else in the attendee list, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand so we can promote you to a panelist to speak. Nobody's raising their hand.
Thank you, Sabrina.
No problem.
Okay, now we'll close public participation, move on to item 1A, and that's the approval of the minutes of November 3rd, 2022. Would someone like to move those? Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Any, before I call for a vote, any omissions, corrections, or deletions? Okay, seeing none, I will now call for the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes. And that looks, abstentions. We have one abstention, Mrs. Shanahan. Minutes pass. Okay, next up is item 2A, redevelopment agency, and that is the presentation and update on the Webster Street lot. Mr. Badoli, I believe you will be speaking.
That is correct. Good evening, everyone. How you doing? It's nice to see you all. I appreciate your time. I'm excited to talk tonight about a project that I know many of you have a long history with. Even since I came in here, taking a look at the Webster Street lot, looking at it as a huge opportunity, being a large surface parking lot right in the center of downtown here in Norwalk. What we've been working on over the past year is actually to build upon work that has started back in 2004, if not before that. Doing planning for the lot and looking at it as a redevelopment opportunity, given its significance both in the community, its proximity to transit, and just the general opportunity that we all identified as a community, both in 2004 and then also in 2016. So when I came into this role, we wanted to figure out a way to sort of bring it to life and make it real. So what we ended up doing is issuing a bid for procurement for the lot. So we started over the past year with a request for qualifications. We issued that, I think, around January, and we received 7 very strong responses. We really wanted to see what the market could bring to Norwalk. We conducted a nationwide search. Through that process, we shortlisted 3 candidates. We then went to a request for proposals phase. That generated a lot of new information, new data that we've been vetting over the past few months here. And tonight, we're excited to say that we've actually are bringing forth the selected firm. It's Quarterra. And Quarterra is here tonight to introduce themselves, provide a little bit of overview about their project concept, and talk about the outreach that they plan to conduct on behalf of this project, working with the city and the local community, recognizing that it's a centerpiece of our city, and that we want to make sure that we're getting a lot of input as we develop this process. But we do have some concepts to show you tonight. And again, just kind of want to let you all know that this is sort of the first step in the overall process. There's going to be a lot of engagement that's going to be occurring over the next few months here as we work with Quarterra to identify the details of the actual deal, which will obviously work through as we've done in the past with a land disposition agreement and a term sheet. But in the meantime, I wanted to introduce Quarterra to you all and let them introduce themselves, talk about their project, and then we could talk a little bit more about the process and next steps from there. So with that, I would like to introduce the team for Quarterra. I'm not sure, either Doug or Greg, will you be presenting tonight to start?
Yes, I will. I'll kick us off, and then I'll hand it over to Doug for some additional details. So, good evening, everyone. Great to be here with you this evening, if only virtually. And Brian, thanks for the intro, and just let everybody know that we're very honored to be selected. To date anyway, as the name developer. I look forward to continuing on in the process and continuing to move forward on this. So just to give everyone a little bit of an introduction on Quarterra and who we are as a start. So Quarterra is formerly known as Lennar Multifamily Communities. We were just recently rebranded. We are a subsidiary of Lennar Corporation, who is the largest home builder in the country. We were founded almost 12 years ago as the multifamily development subsidiary of Lennar, and we've rapidly become one of the largest in the country. We have about 20 offices all over the country, and we've developed over 35,000 units around the country to date. All rental product, all multifamily, certainly all different product types everywhere from lower rise wood built structures all the way up through concrete high rise and everything in between, really. And we also do a great deal of mixed use product with retail on the ground floor and residential above. Definitely very focused on transit-oriented development and placemaking whenever we undertake developments. And we'll go through some things here shortly that we're working on in the area. You can read through at your leisure. I'm assuming you'll have access to some of these slides. If not, we can certainly get these out, I would think. But you can read through some of the superlatives and other interesting facts here. Just very briefly, in terms of capitalization, we're a very well capitalized company, both given who our parent company is the largest home builder in the country, but also given all of our equity and debt relationships all over the capital spectrum. So very well capitalized and certainly well positioned to move through any economic challenges that we may have here in the coming months. So with that, just talk a little bit. Here's a few other facts. Just I probably hit a few of these bullet points here, but as I said, 20 offices all over the country. Again, I'm the divisional president of Cortera here for the region. So this region covers Connecticut, as well as New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Right now, at the moment, Doug, if you want to flip the slide, we are just wrapping up the Smith in downtown Stamford. We are also in the middle of our lease up at the Mitchell in downtown White Plains. The Smith is 414 units in a 17-story building. The Mitchell is 434 units in across three interconnected buildings that range anywhere from 6 up to 15 stories. We have other projects in the region that we've either completed or are working on and continue to be very active. Actually, when we were starting this office up, we actually did office there in South Norwalk. So have a great fondness for South Norwalk, and really, I think, have a great understanding of the area there. So just to talk a little bit more about our thinking here on the project, I think probably what I will do, I'll just briefly introduce also the rest of our team. Antunovich Associates is our architectural firm. I'll kick this off to Brian Gaffney here shortly, but I'll go ahead and roll through the introductions here. Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy is our land use council. They're very certainly experienced all over Fairfield County and the region, and we actually had the opportunity to work with them on our Stamford project. In addition, Redness and Mead is our civil engineer, and also extremely experienced here in the region. We've worked on projects in Norwalk and throughout the region. So with that, I think what I will do very briefly before I kind of just kick it back to Brian to talk a little bit more about the project, I just want to briefly address kind of where we are in the process here. We have been working through concept plans here, which, just to stress, are at the concept level and certainly are in no way set in stone. We think that we have a very exciting and interesting plan that Brian will walk you through. But just want to stress that this is preliminary, it is conceptual, and certainly subject to taking feedback both from all of you as well as the community. One of the things that we really have spent a lot of time talking about as we've gone through the process with Brian and his group at the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency is the fact that the way that we go into these projects really is to do a great deal of community outreach. It's very important for us to get engaged with the community early on, and really hear what people have to say, hear concerns, hear good ideas, and see what we can do to incorporate all of that to make our projects better as we go forward. We know that this is a premier site here for Norwalk, very high profile, and we want to make sure that we get it right, and we want to make sure that we've accounted for all the feedback that we can. So as part of that, what we will be doing as time goes on here is we will be starting off initially with what I would call listening tours, where we be going and meeting with different community groups, setting up evenings where we can go and discuss our ideas on what the development should be and solicit feedback, concerns, ideas, and so forth. And then as the process goes forward, we would be looking to host additional, what I would call open house nights, where all of our experts participating in these open houses that'll be accessible to members of the public, all the various stakeholders from the area, and continuing to solicit feedback and make sure that everybody is well informed and is not walking away feeling like they were either not heard, or making sure that there's no misinformation out there in the community. So look forward to continuing to move forward with that process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Gaffney so that he can walk you through where we are. Brian, again, is from Antunovich Associates, and we're excited to be working with his firm.
Great. Thanks, Greg. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time to hear us. In front of you, you can see is the plan. And like Brian had said, there's been a lot of great work that has been done since 2004 and even earlier about this project. And we didn't want to dismiss any of that. So what we chose to do is actually build upon all of that work that had been done in the past and really insert a few major elements, one of which we know was providing 650 parking spots to replace the surface parking lot, but not have a surface parking lot. So as you could see kind of in the lower right-hand corner is where 50 Sono is. That area called Garage G2 is a 650 parking spot garage that we would hopefully build within the first phase of this project to help free up the remainder of the site. Then what we chose to do was actually flank or border Martin Luther King Boulevard with a series of residential houses set back from the street, as well as allowing the existing sidewalk to be moved to the other side of the existing trees so that we could actually put in a bike lane along Martin Luther King and align with some of the overall master planning for multimodal development. And then what we chose to do is then bisect this overall site with roughly the same pattern of the entrance and exit of the existing parking lot with a road. And what that does for us is it allows access to both the public parking as well as the residential parking, access to loading for all of the retail businesses, and allows people to pull off the street, Washington or Main Street or Martin Luther King, so that, you don't get a lot of double parking, people getting dropped off by a taxi cab, which always seems to happen when you're late for work. And so it allows that more slower speed so that somebody can slow down, see what's going on. The second piece bisecting the site is a pedestrian promenade that extends from Main Street all the way to Martin Luther King Boulevard. This we're hoping and envisioning that it is a place where smaller community events can happen, pop-up retail, sidewalk dining and retail, even some small civic things like chess sets and those types of fun activities, fountains, beautiful tree canopies, those types of things, but dedicated to pedestrian traffic. And near at the end, kind of nestled within the buildings, is what we think is kind of the jewel of the project, which is giving a public park back to the city of Norwalk. And this will actually be built on top of some of our parking structures, and we'll have, by us building them on top of the parking structures, we'll actually have the ability to, one, put the green space on top and also spill over the side. somewhat replicating some of the beautiful landscaping that we see along the shores of Connecticut all over the place. And so I think those are kind of the overall, what we have here is a mixed use project with roughly about 420 apartment units. Along Main Street, we have retail space as well as a co-working or a flexible office space for incubator space, those types of things, as well as the parking that I mentioned before.
Doug, if you might just flip a couple of the slides, I think that some of the following mood images may illustrate some of the points that Brian is talking about.
And these are just some examples of being able to build park space on top of structures. We can make these things feel as if that the structure isn't even there. All of these images, except for the bottom right, are all built on top of structure. And so we think it's a really great thing that we can give back this park piece, that you can have movie nights, farmers markets, or any other type of civic space it can be used for. And then the next slide is really just about creating a generous streetscape, a place where we can have street side dining, where you can have pop-up retail, where you feel safe, especially if you have, street side dining, that the sidewalk isn't 4 feet wide and you're right next to oncoming traffic. So providing that generosity into our development, I think, is the real critical piece. And like Greg had said, all of this is malleable. And I think those are the real main keys for us, is really bringing some housing, bringing some mixed use and retail to downtown, providing the parking, providing a pedestrian-centric and multimodal development, and then providing that park as kind of the jewel on the crown. Back to you, Greg.
Great, thanks, Brian. So I'm going to turn it over to Doug. Doug is a vice president of development here in our Stamford office. And Doug is our primary point person here. And Doug, I'll let you talk a little bit through what we see as a tentative timeline and other details.
Thanks, Greg. And thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet everybody on the call. Just to reiterate what Greg mentioned earlier, we're all very excited to take this next step on what we think is going to be an unbelievable project for the city of Norwalk and for South Norwalk. So I know personally we worked very hard on our proposal. We're all really looking forward to moving this thing forward. I'm going to talk a little bit about timeline because I'm sure everybody's curious about kind of what the next steps are and what the schedule is looking like for those next steps. As Greg summarized for everybody in terms of our public outreach plan, we really plan on focusing on reaching out to the community, to the stakeholders in the city, and really, as Greg outlined for everybody in terms of the listening tours and gathering feedback, we really plan to spend the next 6 to 9 months engaging in that process and really gathering feedback from the community and really putting our development program together. I think we envision that timeline happening through the summer and into the fall. And at that point, I think we're looking to begin design on the project and move forward with a program that is exciting for both the city and the community, as well as for the team and for everybody involved. So, from there, we're looking for full design on the project. We're probably in the range of 18 to 20 months overall in terms of getting to a point of construction. Just as Greg mentioned about the site plan not being set in stone, it's worth mentioning the timeline is also not set in stone. We will move at the pace that is required for this project. We certainly don't want to rush this as it's a very special project for the city. But we also know that everybody wants to see this move forward. So we are flexible, and we're gonna roll with the process and move it along at a good pace. In terms of the construction timeline and phasing, I think really the important point here that I want everybody to take away is, and Brian mentioned this when he described the site plan, is that we plan to begin the construction in the area of the new 650 space parking garage. What we want to do there, and what we envision happening with sort of a staggered construction schedule, is we would build that parking garage and deliver that and make sure that that's up and operating. But at the same time, what we'd like to do is keep as much of the surface parking spaces available for the public. We believe we can keep a large majority of the spaces available while we're building that garage. And then once the garage is open and ready to deliver, we'll move over to the other side of the site and start working over there. So that is really the most important part of our construction phasing. I'm going to hand it back to Greg. He described most of this slide, but I'll let him take it and summarize for everybody.
Right. So again, this process we envision starting very soon here, and we really want to make these sessions as informative as possible and as interactive as possible. I think we'll be certainly renting out spaces for evenings, or going to community centers, or whatever we need to do to make sure that we're hitting all the right constituencies. But really, again, just making sure that we're hearing people and gathering the appropriate feedback so we can get the best possible project as a result. So with that, one final comment, I want to introduce Will Cannon on our team, who is development associate in our office, and Will actually lives in South Norwalk. So he will be all over this project in addition to the rest of us. So Will is a local and resident there of the community. So he'll help us be able to have feet on the ground and keep his ear to the ground as well, to make sure that we know everything going on. So with that, happy to take any questions. Brian Bedoli, I don't know if you had any other points you wanted to make or anything that you wanted us to address.
Yeah, no, we're good. I definitely wanted to open it up for questions, but I think just before we do that, I just wanted to kind of give a background in terms of the process, in terms of how we, selected Quarterra. And I think you heard a lot of the reasons why just in Greg's presentation. But, we convened a group through the procurement process, the RFQ, RFP, of agency representation, also working with the city, planning and zoning, public works, really trying to get a holistic view at this, look at this concept and why we're making this recommendation today. And I think, ultimately we were impressed by the quality of the team. As you note, there was a lot of local and national experience that's being brought to the table as a result of their partnerships with Redness, Carmody, and also just the Quarterra group in general. The capitalization is obviously an important factor that, definitely would open any questions to that, given, the current economic conditions that we're all facing, feeling that, they'll be able to deliver this project in, in a timely manner. And I think, the biggest thing, and hopefully we can talk about it tonight, is the focus on community engagement. I think that was something that definitely impressed us with the group, wanting to use this as the first step towards that process, getting feedback from you all, and hopefully deliver the best project. And I think we can, discuss that tonight, but I think there's a strong commitment on all the parties involved at this point to do so. So I won't go on too long with that, because I definitely want to open it up to any comments, questions, or feedback you have on the overall concept at this stage.
I'll open up the questions in a minute. I just personally have one myself. I know it was said at the last meeting when we were briefed internally that many of the properties abutting the development site are owned by individuals, private individuals, and that it was said that discussions have been had as far as procurement of these parcels for future development. I guess my question is, if for some reason that these properties cannot be purchased from these privately held individuals, can this project move forward? Or do you have a plan B, let's say, if you cannot purchase these properties?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is that, yes, the development can stand on its own without the addition of any of the abutting parcels. I think that certainly adding some of these parcels will make the project stronger and would help to address what I'm assuming are going to be some of the concerns of the community, such as the grocery store and probably a few other things like that. But no, the development is absolutely able to be scaled to stand on its own. We will continue to have discussions with all of the surrounding privately owned parcels to see what is feasible to be added. And we'll continue to update everybody as that process goes forward.
Right. At some point, the profit margins, I mean, it becomes not a worthwhile project, I'm assuming. So I guess this will be one of those scenarios or cases where we play it by ear and negotiations proceed after, we move past this step. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the good news is that nobody's going to have us over a barrel. There are no surrounding parcels that are so critical to this that we would be willing to pay any amount of money to secure them. So that's the good news. But certainly from a holistic standpoint, securing some of these, I think, would be overall beneficial for the development and for the community.
Great. I just want to say, I mean, this project first came to me almost a decade ago, and it's taken quite a bit, but I'm personally happy to see it gotten to this point. Just for the record, Councilwoman Nora Anita Iljelski Eichner has joined us. She's not on the committee with us tonight, and I see Mr. Livingston, you have your hand up for the question.
Yeah, thank you, John. Brian touched on this, and I just wanted to hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak. I mean, given the current economic conditions, I'm curious, I'd like to hear from you more about your sense, more about your financial wherewithal and commitment to the project, and if there's anything in looming down the road that could affect that. I mean, barring any major financial upheaval in the country. I'm just curious, if we can get some comfort on that, because obviously that's a big issue. We've had experience in the past where obviously not developers like you, but other developers have gone bankrupt and leave the city hanging. So I'd just like to hear more from you guys about this. I do think it's a really exciting project. I just like to hear more.
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about how we're capitalized, which may help answer some of those questions. So Quarterra, although we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Lennar Corporation, we actually raise our own private equity funds. We have a series of private equity funds. We're on our third fund right now. That fund is going to be over $1.5 billion. That capital comes from a variety of international institutional investors, anywhere from pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, endowments, so on, insurance companies, so on and so forth. So very, very large, well-heeled investors, and that capital is committed to that fund. So we have access to a large amount of equity vis-a-vis those funds. We also have a number of other I guess what I would call sidecar investors, where very large institutional investors that have large allocations with us as well. So the equity side of the picture for the projects is really very strong. Our parent company enables us to go take land down onto the balance sheet if we need to, basically purchase land if we need to before projects are fully capitalized. And certainly as a company, we have ample capital that we use for pursuit of all these deals. So basically all the pre-development dollars that get spent leading up to the start of construction, we have ample capital internally to support all of those activities. So on the debt side of the picture, we have relationships nationally with all of the large money center banks, all of the major construction lenders. I think right now there's no question that the construction lending market has been very impacted by what's going on with the economy and the actions that the Fed has been taking to slow the economy down. Not only, of course, are interest rates increasing, but the Fed is actively discouraging lenders from lending on construction projects. The good news here is that we've got a pretty significant runway before this project would actually start construction. So as Doug mentioned, we've got a good solid 18 months, I think, before we would really be sticking a shovel in the ground. I think that nobody has a crystal ball, but I think that usually what we see is at the beginning of economic dislocation, like we're seeing. That's when things are really kind of the most tentative and difficult, and things start to free up over time. And I think that certainly for high profile projects like this, A plus real estate and well-funded projects through sponsors such as us, we are much more likely than anybody else really to get those projects going and underway. So I think that we're probably the best position of anybody that would really be looking to develop some project of this scale.
Great, thank you.
Well, if you can afford Bill Hennessy, I feel comfortable. Any other questions? No, Ms. Shanahan.
Great, thank you. No one will be surprised to know that I'm really interested to know what kind of green initiatives you might be putting in these types of buildings. I mean, this is certainly an environmentally sensitive part of our city. It's a very hot area with urban heat island. It also has flooding issues and things like that. Are these the types of design elements that you would be thinking about for this project?
Yes, we absolutely do. Our company has a very substantial ESG initiative going on right now. I'm actually a member of that committee within the overall company, but we really do look to implement sustainable design features where possible. A number of our projects all over the country do have various green designations. Various designations all over the country, of course, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. But various projects have LEED Gold, LEED Silver. There's a number of other ones depending on what state you're in and what level you're building to. But that being said, yes, we are very focused on that. I think that certainly the way that we're designing this project with the open green space, kind of with the porosity of the site, allowing a high degree of pedestrian interaction with the development. Certainly, we're going to be very, very focused on energy consumption. We'll certainly have a big focus on charging stations for electric vehicles. We certainly build at or exceeding all the energy codes that are out there. So that's always a big focus for what we do. And certainly, it probably goes without saying, but being as close as we are to a train station, being in a walkable environment, that reduces automobile usage as well.
Barbara?
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, I just want to comment that so far I'm really liking what I'm seeing and hearing. The park space in particular is really wonderful. And I like hearing about your commitment to environmental concerns, the pedestrian walkway, the bikeability. And I just want to take a moment to thank Brian for your leadership in this. You really are a Renaissance man, and you're moving this forward in a way that will really benefit the community, engaging the community in the process. So I just wanted to thank you for that, Brian.
Thank you. That was very kind.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time, and I look forward to hearing more in the near future.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good night.
Chairman Kites, if I can real quick, just on next steps, just to clarify a couple of points.
Sure.
So yeah, I just wanted to kind of, where we're at this point. We obviously selected a developer to continue negotiations with, and that's the plan, working with them to do their outreach, hear what the community has to say, and then fold that into our process in terms of how we're interacting for negotiations. The next step obviously is refining the site plan based on what they do identify and we do here during the community engagement process, and then working towards a term sheet that would effectively, further construct the actual terms of the deal. So we'll be back in the next few months or however long that takes. I think one of the things that you probably gathered from tonight is that they're really open to that feedback and open to kind of working with us to figure out that process as opposed to trying to stamp something down. So it'll be an iterative process and it's all part of the negotiation, but that's really the step that we're at right now. And we'll be looking forward to bringing more to you in the next months here.
Brian, Chairman Cuddy.
Yes, of course.
So I have a question. So, and maybe this is Steve Kleppen or you as well, Brian. Are we doing a traffic study as well?
Yeah, once we get
started. Okay.
Yeah, once we get the full site plan, we'll be doing, a traffic study. We did a little bit with our TOD plan. We were already kind of thinking ahead towards this, but that'll be obviously part of the whole entitlement process to a full in-depth traffic study to look at the impacts that this may be generating.
Great. Thank you. And I have and to Chairman Keity's question, so is this plan really going to take, if every business owner agreed to this plan, does that mean that most of them or the majority of the buildings or businesses will be gone? Or is there an area or section that surrounds that property that's going to stay, that we're not touching other than the 50 Washington Street building?
Yeah, if you look at their site plan, a lot of it that goes along Main Street isn't really to be touched. The plan is to preserve a lot of that. And then whatever discussions that occur, we're really looking, that's going to be part of the whole process. So I don't think I have a clear idea to be able to communicate. One thing that wasn't mentioned, there's the office space that may occur by the pedestrian promenade. It's a nice incubator space. So there might be some new businesses that are able to come into there. But we're, again, going to initiate the process of having these discussions to figure out the most minimally disruptive path. And then one that brings the most as opposed to takes things away.
And I didn't hear anything about, maybe I missed it, is workforce housing or affordable housing in the plan? I know everything is 10%, but is that what we're sticking to? Is the 10%?
Yeah, we're looking at ways to maximize that. We're trying to figure out how best to serve that. There's some number of state programs that we're currently interrogating concurrent to all of this to help try to get as much affordable and mixed income housing as we can in this project.
Great. Thank you. I'm not going to pat you on your back, Brian. I think Lisa already did it. We know what you're doing for the city of I'm only kidding. Great job. And I just have to say, Mr. Hennessy, I said to somebody, I don't know who it was, John or Brian. I think I know that guy. I've seen that guy. What is he a part of? I guess everything in the city of Norwalk. So always good to see you.
Well, we're always excited to work on projects that are this impactful and transformative. And that's one of the things that me and my partners, Lisa Feinberg and Jason Klein, are excited about here. Our role will be to help weave the town's plan of conservation and development, its zoning regulations, the redevelopment plan into, the fabric of what you've seen demonstrated on the site plan tonight.
Great.
Okay, thank you all. Okay, moving on. Item B1 under planning and zoning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute all documentation and/or resolutions associated with the city of Norwalk opt-out of the state of Connecticut accessory dwelling units provisions of Public Act number 21-29 HB 6107. Would someone like to move that? Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. I believe Mr. Kleppen was going to speak to this. Is he with us tonight, Sabrina?
I am.
Oh, you are? I don't see you. Oh, there you go. Sorry, Steve. How are you?
Good. I try to stay off camera when I'm not needed, so I'm here.
So yeah, I know that we've gone back and forth. I know Planning and Zoning Commission revisited this, made some modifications, setbacks, so forth. Can you please explain to the group what has been approved by Planning and Zoning and what changes have been made to the original state recommendation?
Sure. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So in kind of the red text is the correspondence to the commission regarding a couple changes that the committee wanted to see. One was in terms of requiring, centered around notification to the neighbors, requesting a site plan application so that way the neighbors would be notified and could weigh in on that. And the other request was to address the proposed setbacks that were within the original draft. Ultimately, the commission decided they did not want to require the, notification to the neighbors or the site plan application process. Basically, their reasoning was they felt that was just another obstacle and another cost, which would get in the way of providing the ADUs. But they did agree to have the setbacks mirror what other accessory structures are already required to do within the various zones. So that's reflected in the red text that you see on the screen. And that's really the kind of the sum of the changes.
Steve, John, if I might, Steve, what's the difference between these setbacks and what we saw last time?
So the crossed out text here, Mr. Livingston, if you can see that, I kind of highlighted through there. So everything was 10 feet, if you can see through here. Okay. Now, if you're in, for example, if you're in the AAA zone, you go from 10 feet to 30 feet, which is the setback currently.
Because as I recall, the ADUs would not be essentially in front of the existing structure, right?
That part hasn't changed.
Okay, that's what I was wondering about. Okay, thanks.
Steve, that's also a difference from the state statute and what is being proposed locally, right? I mean, because the state statute doesn't prohibit ADUs to be in front of a structure, right?
Correct. Yeah, our thinking, and this was backed up with a seminar that we participated on with, I'm forgetting the group, but it was a senior group that was talking about ADUs, and they advocated for not allowing the ADUs in the front yard as well, just because aesthetically it's probably not the best approach. AARP, that's who it was, sorry.
Anyone in the committee have any questions?
Yeah, I do, Chairman Kites, David Huvelman. I still feel that what we're doing here is more restrictive than what the state statute is. And I still don't know, this is still a draft, and we're still, we don't know, actually, we don't have the final on what our zoning code rewrite is going to be. And my fear is that we continue down a path of restricting these. We're never going to see them happen. And I think that this is a tool in our housing arsenal that we're not utilizing. So I still, as I said before, and I'll say again, I'm a no vote on this, on the opt out. So.
Okay. Barbara?
Yes, thank you, Chair Kites. Yeah, I just want to thank you for the Planning and Zoning Commission for adding in the setback information. I think that that's really made a difference for me in terms of, going out and looking at my property and recognizing that the reality is it wouldn't work on my property. And I think that that doesn't necessarily make it more restrictive. It just means that, I think it really creates a situation where, we will need to rely on, zoning enforcement and making sure that it just goes through the process. I think that it's going to be just fine, and I'm going to support this.
Anyone else? I think you all know how I feel. I'm very displeased and disappointed in the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think this came down from the state as a way to add housing stock to rural communities where that don't have, I guess, waypoints and other, multifamily homes, and it was under the cover of affordable units, homes for grandma and grandpa. But I think without these restrictions in place and not requiring blood relatives or any sort of income designation, I think you're opening this thing up to people just looking to make additional income by having a rental unit on their property. I think we're personally, I think, there's cost been placed on these accessory units of $100,000 to $200,000, and I think you could do them for far less. So I just, like I said, I would have liked to have seen this be site plan review to at least to notify neighbors. I don't understand, be honest with you, the logic behind not doing it. Cumbersome additional cost, a nominal cost to me personally, my own opinion. I think, just to have that extra step would save us a lot of problems in the future. And I plan to make this also clear at the common council meeting, because first place people are going to come when they come home and they have an accessory unit right next to their house is they're going to come to the council members, their representatives, not really knowing the structure of the process how this all goes. So like I said, I'm very disappointed in planning and zoning for not adding that, but I guess that's the way the ball bounces. So, but also understand the importance of opting out, because this is far better than what came down from the state, and we modified it to our needs, like I said, versus what I think the intention was to add housing stock to those rural towns that don't have enough rental properties. So that being said, and there are no other questions, I will now, I see Nora, you have your hand up? Nora, are you with us?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to briefly, I'm not a member of this committee, but I didn't want it to come as a surprise to anyone when this comes in front of the council that I will be joining Councilmember Huvelman in my no vote on this. I feel strongly that increasing our available housing stock, particularly for our young people and our young families and our seniors, is really crucial. And the thing that I hear most from people in Norwalk is I want to be able to start my family here, or I want to, I've been here my whole life, I want to stay here. I think ADUs are excellent solutions to that. I particularly object to the limitation on size, to the reduction to 700 feet, and the prohibition on front yards. The reality is, if you drive around West Norwalk, if you drive around lots of parts of our city, people have yards that are, substantial and could easily accommodate, a detached unit without being in any way imposing on their neighbors. I think that this is going to create a headache for the variance. I think people are going to be coming in for variances. I think the VBA, which is already overwhelmed, and working on a 3 months or more delay, is just going to be swamped with people looking for variances on this. And so anyway, I personally think that the state regulations at this point, being less restrictive, is better for us. And like I said, just didn't want there to be any surprises next week. And I appreciate the work that has gone into this. I know it's been a lot of different positions, and I'm glad that we'll have an opportunity to have this discussion going forward.
Josh, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, thanks, John. I just want to join. Look, I come from this from having been on the zoning commission for a couple of years before I was on council. And the thing that I'm struggling with is, on the one hand, I think my initial inclination is to say we want to be able to opt out and have control on our own process. The problem is we don't know what the end result is. And to me, I feel like the two big issues, as Nora was saying before, are one, a location of an ADU. Because even though it may not be aesthetically pleasing, if it's conforming and someone wants to put one of these in their front yard, I can't think of a reason to tell someone why you can't put one of these in their front yard if it's meeting to code and it's perfectly safe and they want to do it. I also don't want to lose sight of what the thing is. I would imagine, and John, I know you and I have sort of discussed this before, I would imagine that most ADUs, when they present themselves, are probably not going to be detached ADUs. They're probably going to be in the version of either inside a home itself, so as like a basement apartment, or attached to an already existing structure, so like on top of a garage. So I just want to caution, this vote tonight and sort of what we're thinking about going forward. If we are planning on being more restrictive, then we do need to be very clear with people on what they can and can't do, because the overall goal of building and diversifying our housing stock, I think, is an essential goal for this city, and a city that desperately needs more housing. So I just wanted to put in my 2 cents. Like Nora, I do not have a vote here tonight, but I just wanted to see this discussion and put in my 2 cents before we take a vote next week.
I just want to add to that point. I mean, to give you an example, I live on a cul-de-sac street, and over the last 8 years, I think every house has turned over once or twice. So, I mean, I get the intention of having a nice place for grandma, grandpa, or that college student wants to move back home is a great idea, but you have a lot of turnaround. And I'm not trying to sway votes. Those are days past. But I guess my point is, you hit a lot of turnaround. You're going to have a detached or attached unit, and the house is going to turn over, and then you're going to add, say, 3 or 4 people to a single family home. So I have concerns, and I have no problem with it as a whole. My personal gripe is the fact that I think neighbors have a right to know. That was it, simple as that. So anyway, I plan to also state that at the council meeting. Mr. Kleppen, I saw your hand up. You have a question?
No, just a response. Just one point of clarification, and maybe it was I just misunderstand what Mr. Goldstein was saying. If someone is attaching making an addition to their house, that wouldn't be the same thing as a detached ADU. Or if they do it internally, then you wouldn't have an issue of the front yard. That doesn't come.
I agree. Yes, of course.
So I'm just saying from an urban design and in a planning standpoint, you do not want accessory structures in the front yard of the house. You don't want to have pools, sheds. It's just not a good look aesthetically. And it's completely, I would say, contrary to everything that we've been working on with the new zoning regulations, which I know you haven't seen yet. So I think from just a planning standpoint, having them in the side or the rear is definitely the more appropriate location for these structures.
Steve, I was trying to draw a distinction between where I think and I think even you and I have talked about this before, where most ADUs are probably going to show up is not in the detached ADU version, but in whether it's a modification to an existing home or an existing structure that's already on the property. So I just want to make sure that people understand what the thing is. And I agree with you, Steve. I think if it were my house, I would think twice before doing it, but I'm not sure I would. If it's perfectly legitimate and safe to do so, I'm not sure I would impose that on someone else just because I don't like it.
Well, I mean, then I would make the argument because that's a lot of things we do with zoning regulations anyway. We regulate the setback, the location, how tall things can go, where it can go. So we kind of do that to establish an urban fabric throughout the community. Anyway.
I hear
you. Okay. Seeing no other questions, I will now call for the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes. 2 abstentions, noes. Let the record show Mr. Huberman voted no. The motion passes. Thank you, Steve. Actually, I believe you're sticking with us for the next item. Item B2, authorize Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute any and all documentation to amend the City of Norwalk Plan of Conservation and Development to include and ratify the waterfront industrial zone study with the link below. Would someone like to move this item? Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. Steve, would you like to, I don't know, I believe you have some sort of brief presentation. Am I correct? Mr. Kleppen? Did he freeze or is he very still right now?
Fell asleep.
I think he's frozen.
He's frozen, right?
Yep.
Okay. Give it a second, and then if not, we'll. All right, you know what? If there are no objections, I'm going to move on to C and then go back once he gets his technical issues corrected. Item C1, authorize Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute a grant agreement between the City of Norwalk and the Norwalk Arts Commission and the Connecticut Office of the Arts in the amount of $1,200. Sabrina, do you want to speak to this, please?
Sure. So there was a Connecticut Office of the Arts grant, that opportunity that was posted a couple months ago. We had applied for some operational funding for some administrative support for the Arts Commission, considering we have all of our funding for arts kind of coming out right now, where we're doing a lot of murals, we're doing a lot of student projects. So this funding will support more administrative support for the Arts Commission specifically to do these projects. In the past, we've used volunteer time. The commission has been leading some of these, but as the amounts get more expensive, it's nice to have somebody as a curator who will be actually on the ground when the artwork is installed. So that's what this funding will be used for. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to continuously get this funding from the Connecticut Office of the Arts as well. We originally asked for $50,000, but we got $1,200, but any little bit helps. So that's the roundabout explanation for this item.
Okay, any questions?
John, you want to move that item?
Yes, I was just going to say, I don't believe anyone moved that item. Mr. Livingston moved that item. All in favor? Unanimous. Great. I guess Steve is still not with us, so.
He lost power and Wi-Fi at his house, so he's calling in
There he is.
phone. He's right here, but if you want to give him a minute or if you want to go to him, he's here.
Steve, are you still capable of giving your presentation via your phone or no?
Steve, you're muted.
And you're muted.
All right, how's that?
You're
Good.
better. We can hear you.
Okay, I don't think I'm going to be able to do my presentation.
Steve,
on.
did you want to email me your presentation and I can share my screen for you?
Yes, let me do that. I wish I would have done an hour ago. Hold on one sec.
Okay, while we're waiting, we got maybe knock out a couple items. If there are no objections. Item C2, approve the sole source request with Kiva User Funds LLC in the amount not to exceed $25,000 for the management distribution of American Rescue Plan Act funds for WMBE matching within the existing Kiva platform, and 2 account numbers are noted. Would someone like to move that item? Thank you, Ms. Young. Sabrina, would you like to speak to that as well?
Yes, so I'm actually going to speak to both of the items since it's a 2-part approval for sort of the same thing. So when we originally talked about the Kiva program, we had a matching component for women and minority-owned businesses. There is a separate contract that we have to sign with Kiva to administer those funds for us. It is a sole source because we're already using the Kiva platform. The other option that we had was to use an outside firm to manage the funding separately, but it would just have to include a different application for each borrower. And additionally, we would have to pay an administration fee that's going to be way more expensive than the one that we're paying for Kiva to administer these on our behalf. This keeps it less clunky and keeps it all in the same system. So essentially, if somebody has a $15,000 loan, once that's funded to $7,500, it'll automatically match dollar for dollar every single donation. So they'll make their loan amount in half of the time. And I know I've mentioned this before in the past. So this is the fee that we'll have to pay to administer the $250,000 we have over the next 3 years. And then the second item is authorizing the actual matching itself. So authorizing the $250,000 to actually be in the system and then to provide that match to the borrowers.
That's great. Mr. Livingston.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Sabrina, I'm confused a little bit. So what does this do that we did not approve before? I'm confused. Is this more money we're giving out or?
It's both. So the first time we did this, we only approved the actual Kiva contract for the technology for them to start the loan program. This is an additional separate contract that has to be executed to do the matching funds.
But
So-
this is just WMBE, or is this for
Yep.
something? And if we don't,
So can I add in just for 1 second? So when we brought the ARPA funding to you and also to finance and the Common Council, we identified that the $247,000 would be a match that for women and minority owned business. So the first vote and the first approval, as Sabrina said, was for the actual use of the software and to bring on the Capital Access Manager. This approval is to be able to more specifically approve the $247,000 to be released for the women and minority match through Kiva. The second part is that we need to have some sort of body we would like to have some sort of body administer the $247,000. And we have a few options to do that. The option that we're recommending and that Sabrina's presenting is to pay Kiva $25,000 to be the active administrator for the $247,000. And by approving them as the active administrator for the funding, it means that they would actually have the ability to work within the software application to be able to match dollar for dollar. And so that's why Sabrina's saying it would be less clunky.
I'm sure this is a great idea. I'm just trying to, so it's costing us $50,000 more to do this than we thought before. What am I missing?
25,000.
Well, you got 25,000 or 2 items, right?
No, it's only 25,000 for the one item, and then the $247,000 is not money going to Kiva, it's money going to the actual borrowers.
Well, this third item says authorize the mayor to execute a contract with Kiva user funds in amount not to exceed $25,000 to disperse. So we're authorizing 25,000 in both of these. First two is approving a sole source request in amount not to exceed 25,000. The next one's a contract not to exceed 25,000. So maybe it's just the language. So
Yeah, I think it's just the language. I'll have to change that for when it goes to.
yeah. So maybe that's where I'm getting
Yeah.
confused. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's just the $25,000 to, that's all that's going to Kiva, and then the $247,500 is the funding that's directly going to the lenders for the match.
And we've already approved that, right? I mean, that's not new money.
No, that's the ARPA money.
Right. So that's why I'm getting confused. So if you can clean these up or tell us, yeah.
Yeah,
before-
I'll combine them into one and make it more simplified.
Okay.
Yep,
Thanks.
no problem.
But then
That-
I think the motion, so just to make sure we're clear, I think then the motion would be to authorize the 25,000 in a contract to Kiva to administer the 247,000 for women and minority owned match through the Kiva program.
Yeah. I
Right,
think that's-
okay.
I guess just to simplify this, I mean, I think if there are no objections, it sounds like we have the answers. It just needs to be worded better. And I guess instead of making an amendment tonight to modify this, give Sabrina some time to make those changes. We're just going to vote on item 2, and that would be a combination of both. And then in the final, we'll come to the council, will be the corrected language with all the appropriate account numbers. That sound good to everybody? Okay.
That's fine.
All right, Mr. Livingston or Ms. Shanahan, has someone moved this? I believe Ms. Shanahan. Yep, great. All in favor? Unanimous, great. Okay. So that eliminates number 3. We did 2. Great. Thank you, Sabrina and Jess on that. Steve, are we up and running? Are we ready to go on item 2?
I'm Brian in my office was just emailing the presentation to Jessica and Sabrina. So hopefully if you want to give me 2 more minutes to see if that works. If not, then we'll have to, I guess, table it till next year.
So I guess maybe time to grab a sip of water or something.
Yeah, I have questions that I can still ask, or you want to wait to the presentation?
I mean, Steve, are you ready to receive questions? Are you?
Oh yeah, questions I can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 things from the report, one of which I think is answered in the report. The other I want to follow up on. The one is how, if I look at this, where the waterfront zone meets Washington Street, obviously one's a historic district, one is the waterfront. And I think I read this in the report. How are you handling that?
Do you mean in terms of like the transition from?
Yeah, the transition. How's that going to work?
So yeah, the slides probably would help in that regard, but the idea is conceptually that the Water Street side of the properties would, kind of trying to mimic what's happening on the other side of the street, but at a smaller scale. While on the water side of the, towards the harbor, that could be some kind of active use, whether it's, as you move further south, obviously you get into the larger properties, you get into more water dependent type businesses and the marinas, but up towards the Washington Street area, the lots are obviously more shallow, so they don't go back as far. So the use would probably be more limited in terms of the water dependency aspect of it. So it would kind of be a transition area. The zoning, we're trying to set it up to be flexible to allow that type of use to make it to make it more in keeping with that and more consistent throughout the area.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping you'd say. The other question I have, and it's really a follow-up from our discussion last month. I still have problems with up the river a little bit with the Divine Brothers, why we are not upzoning those spots.
Well, a couple of reasons. and there's a lot of little nuances to that area. And I think Divine, which is, are you talking solely the properties on the
Well, the
west
heavy
side?
industrial by Divine, and I mean, I know what you said last, well, I think I know what you said last time, but reading the report, I think it's obvious there's a lot of push to make those more, better properties. And I'm not suggesting we throw Divine out by any means, but I just think we need to look forward to what we want down the road. I mean, the harbor and the river is one of Norwalk's prime assets. And I think we're kind of ignoring that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, for a couple of different reasons and a couple of different things, in speaking with them. So as part of this process, you guys were talking a little bit about with your, the prior Webster Street lot and other things in South Norwalk. With this one, I think in terms of outreach, I think one thing we did with this study, which I can't recall doing in any other study, we spoke with every property owner that owns property. I should say everyone except for the guy that has the ice house business, because we just didn't go there. But everybody else that has owned property and or owned a business within the affected parcels, we spoke to them. So we got their input, not only in terms of what's happening with their properties today, but what they see in the future, and then as well going forward. So, speaking, I don't want to speak out of turn about one particular property owner, but, Divine expressed interest in maintaining their business and, continuing to operate in Norwalk as they operate now. They're truly one of the only water dependent uses on the upper part of the harbor. So that has impacts in not only on terms of the travel lanes for the shipping, as well as the, impacts related to dredging, because, you're keeping that water channel at the dredge depths in order to accommodate.
Steve, if I could just interrupt for a second, I'm not suggesting throwing Divine out there. That's not what I'm saying. At some point, Divine won't be there. That's all I'm saying. And I think we should be looking at that. Of course, you have to ask a property owner what they want for the property. They want to do what they want to do, right? That's kind of an obvious answer you're going to get from them. And again, it's nothing against Divine. It's just, I think, going forward, we need to look for the time when they're not there, and when we're not doing that in this study, as far as I can see.
But I think that transition is not that difficult to transition for, regardless, you have to first, contemplate what that future use could be on the property. If it's something, if you're thinking longer term in terms of not industrial at all, and it was something that was more compatible to, what's going on to the north and Wall Street area, then you would just adjust the zoning to accommodate that. So I don't think there's anything prohibitive in that. But
hasn't the horse already left the barn at that point?
No, why would you think that?
I mean, because if they sell the property to somebody else, we don't have any, at that point, we have nothing can, change in the zoning after somebody else has purchased the property.
But we talked about this a lot with the industrial zoning down on, Meadow Street in and around the new school site. They can sell the property 40 different times to 40 different operators, as long as that use is maintained. The zoning is not relevant.
I get that, Steve. I'm just saying if they were to sell to somebody else, and I just think, look, I don't want to belabor the point of this thing. I made my point that I think we're being short-sighted doing this. We upgraded down by Meadow Street. I don't know why we're not doing it here.
Well, I think there's completely different circumstances between the two areas. I think it's a little bit of apples and oranges.
If I can jump in real quick on this conversation, and Tom, thank you for bringing it up. The problem that I have is that we're not allowing for a potential break in the chain. That if we've changed the zoning so that eventually there could be a break in the chain, and eventually we can reclaim the waterfront. If it's 50 years from now, it's 50 years from now. But the problem that I'm seeing is, and you use the Divine being water dependent. We don't really do industry the same way on the water as we did 75 years ago. Water is not an artery that is as meaningful in that way. Now, will it come back? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but we are, what I'm looking at is the potential for being able to get back to the water, to get to that asset that we have, and setting that up by changing the zoning now, and that we allow for the potential break in that chain so we can get to the water. And that's where I'm not seeing this in this study and in these recommendations.
Well, I mean, a couple of things. I think Divine is actually a water dependent use because the materials that they use in their production, a lot of that comes in by barge. So if that's not coming in by barge, that means it's coming in by truck, which has more detrimental impacts to the city than just, just having them being on the water itself. I think I'm still just a little confused on which I mean, I think I'm hearing what you're saying about the zoning, but changing the zoning to another zone doesn't necessarily mean something else is going to happen in the future. And keeping it in the industrial 1 zone doesn't prohibit somebody else from doing so. Changing it to something more in line with what I think the direction you want to go in the future. Obviously, under current market conditions, if something went to, like say you put the ability to have it like a mixed use type of atmosphere or a mixed use environment with, like a residential component, the market's going to definitely be positive towards that based on the proximity to Wall Street, proximity to the water. And then at that point, you can redevelop it and get the waterfront access and the things that I think you're striving for. But just because you don't change the zoning now, I don't think that it prevents it from happening in the future.
But I still think it's harder in the future to make that change if you leave it as heavy industrial. You don't set yourself up for breaking that chain. And if we ultimately want to break the chain and get into mixed use, get into possible residential down by the water, which that waterfront is a huge asset for this city, I think we're doing a disservice to the future of Norwalk by not setting ourselves up for the potentiality of that happening.
And I don't know why we don't make it easier for ourselves now, do it now, because it definitely putting it off makes it harder.
I mean, I think that could be argued one way or other. I don't know if that necessarily makes it harder because, you see zoning designations changed all the time based on the appropriateness of a project, so long that it's something that's consistent with the overall plan of the city.
Would downzoning be consistent with the planning for the city? I mean, it seems like the two arguments that Mr. Hoovelman and Mr. Livingston says is really more in the plan we have for the city. Is it not that we want to have more access with the river?
I mean, yeah, I definitely think so. I think though, what this plan, speak, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but speaking for the people that were involved in the study itself, that we worked long and hard to try to get a compromise of the various pushes and pulls that came with the plan in terms of improving water quality, providing public access, maintaining businesses, enhancing businesses, trying to maintain that water dependent look and feel for the city. So there were a lot of voices at the table, and what we proposed and what the draft that's in front of you now we feel is the the compromise piece of where things stand.
John, if I may, I just would like to add, this information just feels antithetical to how we approach Meadow Street. So I'm just confused by this approach.
Well, I think Meadow Street and this area are different. I think Meadow Street, the initial proposal was, if you remember, was not to rezone that from I-1. The proposal was to keep it as I-1. There were uses within I-1 that we identified as uses that we did not want to see going forward in terms of, trying to remember, for instance, even in this area, the asphalt plant, for example, that was one that everybody said, the asphalt plant's not the best use for downtown. We wanted to try to limit the junkyards and the transfer stations and all those kind of things. So the I-1 was going to change, but what you could do within the I-1 was probably going to be curtailed a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I have to say that I'm not going to support this now. I mean, I need more information, so I'm going to tell you right now, I'm voting against it.
Now, I'm going to echo Mr. Livingston. I'm a no vote at this particular juncture. I don't see this as being consistent with the things that we are doing within the city.
And I too participated in a lot of this talk, and the talk I heard was that we really needed the access to the waterfront. So without thinking forward, I also won't support it.
Same here.
All right, to keep this ball moving, as you all know, I get very frustrated when the time things take in the city. And you know what? I am somewhat in agreement with the group. Is there something we can work on, and Steve, maybe that we could all work on to kind of better satisfy the needs of not just the committee but others on the council? I guess a recommendation for alternative zoning recommendations for the Divine and other areas. I mean, can you come back to us with something more along the lines of what the committee's looking for?
Sure, we can change the designations on there. I mean, I also recommend you maybe reach out to speak with them directly too. I mean, I imagine you're going to get a completely different reaction when you talk to those folks as well. Or maybe you don't. Maybe
Steve, you've said that several times now, and it doesn't. We're not talking about Divine as Divine. We're talking about the property. So we're by definition talking about when Divine's not there. So I don't think that's really relevant right now. Now, I'm glad to work with you and talk to you about it, but I just don't think that argument works.
Well, but your changes directly impact their property and business now too. It's not just the future; it's what they're doing right now.
But how does that do that?
Well, you're changing
but they can continue, as you've said numerous times, they can continue to do what they're doing.
Right, but it could hinder. I mean, I haven't talked to them in, I don't know, over a year. Maybe they had other plans for the property, and as a result of the rezoning, it may no longer be viable. That could directly impact their business.
So I think as a way to wrap up the conversation from our end is that we will sort of take back the waterfront study, take a look at the long-term plans that are identified in the POCD, and revisit some of the conversations that were had as part of the working group for the waterfront study. And Steve and I can take a look at that and maybe touch base with a few folks one-on-one and regroup and decide how we want to move forward with this.
Okay, motion to table the item. All in favor? Unanimous. Ms. Young, Darlene, you, yep, okay. All right, great. All right, to be continued. But I think, we all kind of said our piece and know where we stand. So hopefully we can keep this ball rolling and have something more, something that it's more acceptable and more along the lines of what we're thinking. All right, I believe that's it. Right, correct, yes. All right, so do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. All in favor? All right, great. Everyone have a good night, good weekend, and good everything else.